I find him a blinking nuisance. I wish we could ignore him because, frankly, I think he's an irritant and he's given far too much time and space.
But isn't it, when I was talking about that sign that said free Tommy Robinson, it's like free Nelson Mandela. He's not Nelson Mandela.
We've all got a checkered past. You've got to look at Nelson Mandela. He was a terrorist. We can go that sort of thing. Then he became a god to everyone around the world.
The frame has been set by the establishment for many years now to make that man the villain of the piece, to turn him into some sort of dangerous, evil, pernicious antichrist almost. He has become almost like kryptonite politically, and even kryptonite to a supposed free speech channel that wants to show it's on the side of the masses, but again is too dearly livid to have a voice on there that might support or endorse Tommy Robinson.
Growing outrage that GB News described Tommy Robinson as a boil on someone's bum while discussing the outrageous reality that there is lawfare against a civil prisoner, keeping him in solitary confinement for a ludicrous amount of time. Something that GB News and right-wing commentators on GB News should clearly be concerned about. But what interests me is this attempt by the mainstream media to continue to present Tommy Robinson as a monster. So I will show you what Mike Parry had to say in case you missed it in just a moment. Then we'll get reaction from Alex Phillips and Howard Cox. But I was struck today by this monster, Tommy Robinson, and some of the things he has done in private over the past few years that are now being shared with people so outraged by his portrayal in the mainstream media. Watch.
Good to see ya.
Hey, shoplifter.
Shoplifter.
How are you?
You alright?
Yeah. Fucking hell, how did you come in?
I'll just put you some flowers.
Oh.
How you doing, mate?
Oh, bless you.
You alright?
Oh, thanks.
No, it's alright.
Let me get him to be back to it.
Oh, mate,
yeah.
You good?
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you.
Let me get a speed bug up. No, don't bite me.
Right.
It's your namesake.
It's Tommy.
It's your namesake.
The little angry one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you alright then?
Fucking look me.
Now look, Howard Cox, Tommy Robinson isn't saying he's the perfect person. He's not saying that he has the perfect past. However, we do have a lot of forgiveness in this country for someone like Alistair Campbell, who lied about an illegal war leading to the deaths of hundreds of young British men, yet he's allowed back on the mainstream media constantly, a permanent fixture on the British Bashing Corporation and Sly News, yet there is this desire to paint Tommy Robinson as a monster.
You're absolutely right. And, you know, I have to say that, you know, I was, that monster was portrayed to me before I really went to visit him. I had to go and sit and see him in prison to find out who is this guy and why is the reform, you know, people like Nigel and people like Richard Tice were telling me that he was the pariah, the ultimate antichrist. You know, what I don't understand, you know, is what that was all about. So I went to see him and I spent 2 hours sitting with him, talking to him. And I was inspired by him, what he was trying to do. We've all got a checkered past. You've got to look at Nelson Mandela. He was a terrorist. We can go that sort of thing. Then he became a god to everyone around the world. And the point is, the worst thing about this is a civil offence. Yes, he broke the law. He played that video, and he was sued by the guy that, you know, in terms of defamation, the Syrian, all those sorts of things. But this does not warrant 18 months in solitary confinement or even in prison. He should be under house arrest and maybe a tracker put on him. That's my point. And it's a shame that it got to the stage at this issue, because I support virtually every policy in Reform UK's contract with the people. In fact, I helped write the transport one. We want a 20p cut in fuel duty. Wouldn't that be lovely? But what I do not understand is why there's so much hatred towards Tommy from the Reform head, you know, echelons at the top. And that's why I left. I couldn't handle it. And I'm a principled person. I still believe in Reform UK, what they're trying to do, but you do not treat grassroots people. And this is important, Dan. and Alex to understand. I've had probably 500 or 600 communications from grassroots reform people, chairmen who've been thrown out, been so-called vetted. These are good people who are dedicated to Nigel. And let's face it, it's the Nigel party, it's the Nigel show. And that's what Rupert was trying to say about him being a messiah. He's still seen by that. In fact, a major London person who supported me in my London election, or attempt to be elected as London mayor, said when he heard that Nigel was coming to lead the party, he said, he walks among us now. He is the Messiah. He walks on water. That was an email I got from him to say that. Now, I don't go as far as that. All I can say, this could be solved. And Alex is dead right. And she's very convincing, Alex. And I'm very fond of what she says about most things. And I do. But the difference I have here is Nigel needs to wake up and sort out and make sure he looks after the grassroots, because at the moment he's alienating too many.
Well, just before Alex comes in, I want to show you both this, I think, particularly egregious piece of broadcasting on GB News. Obviously, I'm all for free speech, by the way. If they want to have guests on who just hate on Tommy Robinson, that's absolutely fine. But I think what my issue is with Mike Parry here is that it's a lot of personal attacks, and I'm almost certain he hasn't really looked into Tommy Robinson because he's a mainstream media guy and he follows the narrative. But Alex, let's just watch along with this and then I'll get you to respond off the back.
Because people at home may not quite understand the context of this. His contempt of court
on 10 occasions
was for being told, you are libelling this Syrian refugee boy in this movie, this documentary that you have made. You've put it on your Twitter account. You've shown it in Leicester Square. We've told you not to play it, and you keep playing it. That is what he's in prison for, Mike.
Yeah, exactly.
10 breaches.
I mean, this is a classic case of where I feel he's such an irrelevant person. I'm fed up to the back teeth of him. He hasn't got any values which anybody could possibly admire, but he's, unfortunately, he's like an irritating boil on your bum, and you can't get rid of him.
Not an image I cherish.
No, and you can't get rid of him. But I'm fed up to the back teeth of this guy. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's all down to martyrdom. But where I completely dismissed him as a fantasist was when he tried to protest to police on one occasion when he was arrested. Oh, you're arresting me because I'm a working journalist.
He's a very interesting.
But all those points you made, Bev, about, you know, Tommy Robinson couldn't really express himself properly, boy from Newton, all that. But he now thinks that he is, you know, somebody who is expressing himself properly and eloquently, and I'm making the argument, millions of people are following me. I find him a blinking nuisance. I wish we could ignore him because, frankly, I think he's an irritant and he's given far too much time and space.
But isn't it, when I was talking about that sign that said free Tommy Robinson, it's like free Nelson Mandela. He's not Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
Right, Stephen, Mike.
So, Alex Phillips, I mean, I was always told that GB News didn't want to just do attacks on human beings for no particular reason, you know, describing someone as a boil on your bum. But I would argue that that rant from Mike Parry comes from a place of ignorance, actually.
Well, look, it suggests two things, doesn't it? So first of all, you know, you can't control what a guest on a programme says. I'm glad to see GB News seem to have got new chairs. Sitting on their old stools behind that desk is deeply uncomfortable.
Yeah, my chair always used to collapse. I know I'm a bit bigger than you, Alex, right? But seriously, my chair would just like slowly be collapsing.
Rotate and go every time.
But Alex, I will just say though, I agree with what you're saying about the guests. Of course you come, but they only, have you noticed, they will only talk about Tommy Robinson when it's a very negative judicial story. So when he loses, they talk about it.
So this is exactly what I've been trying to say earlier. It's because the frame has been set by the establishment for many years now to make that man the villain of the piece, to turn him into some sort of dangerous, evil, pernicious antichrist almost. And again, you know, I was talking about politics and the broad brushstrokes that people tend to pick up on. If you go and ask a lot of people out there on the streets, there are people who know, who follow Tommy Robinson, who support him, who adore him, frankly. But then you speak to a load of other people and they've got no idea. They've not done their research. They haven't looked into anything he's said or done. What they've heard persistently for over a decade is this man is a monster. And so you say to those people, what do you think of Tommy Robinson? And they go, oh gosh, not for me. agree. And this has been the case now for so long that he has become almost like kryptonite politically, and even kryptonite to a supposed free speech channel that wants to show it's on the side of the masses, but again is too dearly livid to have a voice on there that might support or endorse Tommy Robinson. And so this is the same thing that Reform is having to grapple with, and Reform can make a decision that they going to have that as part of their dialogue, that they don't need to talk about it, that they want to focus on their politics and their manifesto, because realistically Tommy Robinson hasn't asked to be a member of Reform or asked to stand in an election for them, and at the moment the poor sod is stuck in solitary confinement, so Lord knows what he thinks about it. But this is why it's been deliberately made by the establishment, by the powers that be, that he is considered beyond the pale. Because what he is saying for the establishment is beyond the pale. They don't want these issues to be spoken about in public because they're the ones who have let multiculturalism spiral out of control. They're the ones who have mortgaged our safety at the altar of a political experiment of ridiculously high immigration and lack of integration. They're the ones who know you can't put the genie back in the bottle. And we saw this after Southport, didn't we? Well, so-called rioters, and I've got a lot of questions about still what went on over those few days. They went after the people they knew they could go after, and then you saw the same authorities saying to men who came out of mosques with weapons, would you mind just going back and putting those weapons inside the mosque again, please, lads? It was two-tier policing, and we've got two-tier justice, and we've got two-tier media. And this is why when you are going to operate in the world of trying to actions, you have to be ever so careful about these massive hot button issues that if you get them wrong, you can be destroyed.
Or do you have to do a Trump? Do you have to do a Trump and just say, no, we're going to destroy the system, we're going to take over, and then we're going to find a way. By the way, though, I do just want to ask you about I want to ask you about Mike Parry, Howard, because I mean, Mike Graham, good friend, he has no time for Mike Parry these days. And I think part of it is because Mike Parry does make those sort of uneducated statements. What did you make of what he had to say about Tommy Robinson on GB News? But first, we ingest a credit card's worth of microplastics every week. Tiny particles in our food, water, and air. They don't just pass through it, they build up in our organs, disrupt hormones, and are linked to fertility issues, neurological disorders, and heart disease. In early 2024, human brain samples contained 0.5% plastic by weight, with higher levels tied to Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative diseases. Microplastics have also been found in semen and placentas, correlating with lower sperm quality, fetal exposure, and declining fertility. BPA and phthalates mimic or disrupt hormones like estrogen and testosterone, leading to reduced sperm counts, irregular cycles, and development issues in children. With microplastics in bottled water, food, and even household dust, avoiding exposure is impossible. But you can support your body's ability to fight back. Moringa activates the NRFT pathway, your body's detox switch, helping flush out microplastic-associated toxins like BPA, BPS, and phthalates. This pathway boosts detox enzymes, making harmful chemicals and water soluble for easier excretion. Now, not all moringa is created equal. You know that many supplements use lower quality sources, root, bark, or contaminated powders, lacking the full spectrum of benefits. Plus, moringa naturally tastes bitter, and to be honest, it's pretty gross, which is what led me to Morning Bean by Verso, a rich, chocolatey coffee alternative packed with moringa, cocoa, polyphenols, and electrolytes to help detox, fuel energy, performance, focus, and longevity. And look, you know, I love this. I've been actually drinking it all day to try and deal with this hay fever. And it's honestly amazing. I'm not joking. It tastes like a McDonald's hot chocolate. It's that type of taste. I love a McDonald's hot chocolate. And I don't actually know how they mask the bitter notes of moringa, but it doesn't bother me because it just tastes so good. Plus, Verso only uses pure moringa leaf, the most nutrient-dense part of the plant, and conducts third-party testing on every batch to ensure potency, purity, and safety. You can't avoid microplastics, but you can support your body's detox process. Start your day with Morning Bean for research-backed detox, energy and health. Click on the link below or visit buy.ver.so/outspoken. Use the coupon code outspoken for 15% off. That's buy.ver.so/outspoken. Use the coupon code for a 15% discount. But now, back to the show.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. It was based on ignorance. He hasn't met him. He has no clue what he's about whatsoever. Tommy Robinson hasn't done all things right. But I wouldn't have known about the child rape gang issue if it wasn't for him. The depth of that sort of thing going on. That's how I learned about it, and that's hurt me. And thank heavens, people like Charlie Peters at GB News has told us about 50 towns with amounted to 100,000 kids that have been systematically raped. I mean, that's the thing that matters at the base of this. It shouldn't be about the person, the character. It's about the story. And Mike Parry is one of those sorts of people. And I've spoken many times to Mike Graham. I'm sure you have, Alex, as well, about that Mike, the two Mikes, because they obviously worked well together years and years ago. And he has got no time for the man because he shoots from the hip. And that hip is completely and utterly in the gutter. That's the way he works.
Very good point. Very good point. Alex Phillips, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I actually don't know Mike Parry from Adam. I've never met the guy. I know that Mike Graham doesn't have particularly fond words to say about him. But, you know, there are people who sustain a living by becoming shock jocks, by saying things that they think are going to get them the viral clicks. And maybe that is part of his play here. But the thing is, you know, the reason why Tommy Robinson comes up as an issue time again on independent media, where legacy media is too scared to talk about it, is because it feels almost dangerous to talk about it, because it's been banned, because it's been forbidden. And like I said before, the reason it's been forbidden is because the establishment have tried to cover up the sort of things that he was speaking about. And they had to make a scapegoat. They had to find some way of personifying all of this and throwing that person under a bus. That's what's gone on. I'm incredibly alarmed and worried about the fact that, as Howard was saying, this was a civil situation. This was a civil law case. How that ends up being someone in a high security prison in solitary confinement, I've got no idea, particularly when you look at judgments against people who are a danger to society, who are allowed to be released early or don't go to prison at all, and then actually go on to commit violent or sexual offences. It is absolutely overplaying the hand, in the same way that Lucy Connolly, that poor woman, sentenced to 32 months in prison for writing something in the spirit of the moment on Facebook, she later deleted. There was no proof of causality. There couldn't have been proof of causality because she wasn't there directing armies of people to go out and riot. It's sickening what goes on in this country. It's sickening how our judicial system thinks that we're just going to continue having faith in it when it makes these erroneous decisions time and again. We need to be a high trust country. We need to know that when we go to court, we're going to get a fair trial, regardless of our politics, regardless of our background, regardless as well of what we might have done previously in life. We don't have that in the UK, where you can have the sort of double jeopardy. You have to discard all of that and look at things purely on a situation, on a legal basis of the case in hand at that present moment. And what we can see now in front of our very eyes over and over again is actually our judicial system is weighted to try and get rid of anybody who dares question the establishment, who dares break taboo. And yet when it comes to people who really are the dangerous ones, particularly if they happen to be from a minority, it's the softly approach. Why? Because the thing they're terrified about is people turning out en masse on the streets, not from the white working classes, although they are very afraid of that, but mainly from the sectors of society, the communities from which these people are coming from. They're terrified if they happen to put, let's say, an Islamic agitator who's been protesting outside school and making threats. If they put that person in prison, they know what will happen. It's a bit like when you pluck a hair, 10 more comes to his funeral. They are so worried about upsetting the apple cart because they've created this hellishly fragile, toxic situation where, frankly, civil unrest is only ever a blink away. And so they live now in trying to bail out the bucket, thimble by thimble, all the time to try and stop things from becoming a greater conflagration. And for them, Tommy Robinson represents somebody who puts a cat amongst the pigeons, who will actually destabilise this sort of convoluted filigree of so-called social peace, when actually what it is essentially top-down suppression of the truth.
Alex, that text I got from Richard Tice threatening me with expulsion if I continue to talk about the Antichrist, if I continue to do that, was fair?
Well, listen, look, I don't want to sort of speak bad of Richard Tice. I adore that man. I think actually he's incredibly magnanimous and been very important in UK politics for managing to keep reform going. I always think when you communicate with people, there's a delicate way of doing it. There are ways in which you can have a conversation in human terms. And I don't know the wording of your text. Of course I don't. But it is party policy, because it's such a hot potato issue, that reform rightly, and I don't mean rightly from a moral sense, I mean rightly from a strategic sense, rightly realise is going to cause them a lot of damage if they open the door to it. And so if the party policy is, look, we just can't play with that fire, I'm afraid, so everyone understand that and, you know, zip it when it comes to this topic. We've got elections to win. Then that's party policy. But like I said, when it comes to communications between people, there's just better way to handle things sometimes. Like, I don't know what he wrote to you.
Well, Alex, the important thing to understand about this is that Richard Tice actually asked me to stand as London Mayor. I'm very fond. I've got admiration. He stood down when Nigel became leader. All those sorts of things. You couldn't ask for a better, nicer guy in that respect. And I'm feeling for him a bit at the moment where he's sitting with the party. But all I'm saying to you is that there is about probably, I know of at least 500 or 600 people who are in my position who support Tommy big time, who are in the Reform Party.
Well, of course.
And
as I say, I do think that probably after this local election campaign, we may see some changes at the top of Reform UK, even though they will not be wanting to admit that now.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.